had a conversation that went on for a little while, I think, about possible shows that might be interesting to both of us to do. And this was on the list. And I think it was sort of not at the top of my list, out of, I think, a little bit of fear. And also, I didn't know it very well. And so John really encouraged me to take a long look at it, and that's when I started. It really planted a scene, and now I'm obsessed.
I read it, and it's such an adult comedy. You know, it's so wonderful. It's like watching an old movie. Like it's watching a screwball comedy from the 30s that goes even deeper into the relationship. And
it's about a couple who have been divorced for 5 years who accidentally re-meet, and the spark flies and everything goes crazy. So she says, if we hadn't met, do you think we would have gone on with these new partners? They're both on their honeymoons with their second spouses.
And they have adjoining suites. And they encounter each other in the verandas of their adjoining suites.
So, the thing about it is, it's sort of a perfect play. I mean, John was talking about the language, which is brilliant, but also the action of it and the characters. Everything comes together in this beautiful, beautiful way. I mean, it's not all about the action, you know. The language. It's the action. And as the play ages, it seems to get better and better in a way. And I think that's what's so interesting about it. And he himself said, I was just writing an entertainment. But he was touching on things.
Yeah, but Oscar Wilde said that too a lot about it.
Yeah. I knew the later plays of Noel Coward very well, and I know who Noel Coward is, and I knew that his first play, for example, was a success, was The Vortex, which is actually a play about drug addiction, and is very, very edgy. So I knew he had an edgy side, but I never associated Private Lives with anything other than the more light-hearted, somewhat formulaic plays that I think his later plays are. And I thought, oh, you know, we're going to be doing something like Hearted Adam and Runs. But then you get into the research and you start to read the play properly. And you start to look at the period in which it's set. And it's a very early piece. It's written in 1931, which, you know, it's basically the end of the era of the flappers, the roaring 20s, the 1920s. The end of that period where everyone's coming out of this First World War and going, oh my God, now what? And all of that leads you to this kind of amazing world. And the other thing that struck me between the eyes was the fact that it's both acts, well, there's actually 3 acts, but effectively it's set in 2 scenes, are in France. He chooses to set the whole play in France. 2 British people married to 2 other British people, and where do they have all their conversations and do all their fighting? It's in France, which tells me something as an English person who knows what the English relationship with France is. He was looking for somewhere to say these people are just able to go to places where, if they were in England, they might not go.
It's like what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas.
Yeah, it's all about the look, the sort of murderous intention, and a perfectly polite glass of champagne.
I personally had to get used to, when somebody's saying, "Don't be an idiot," as opposed to, "Don't be an idiot." There's a difference in that, and we're getting used to, "Oh, do shut up, Elliot." Do shut up, and not knowing necessarily how angry they actually are underneath is something that we're looking at.
But I have to say, they often do say what they mean. Disagreeable pig. I don't know, that's pretty straightforward. On occasion.
No, and that's what it is that we learn what's before disagreeable pig. What are the degrees up to that, and there does seem to be at times, anyways, a lid on the behavior, a lid on the emotions. And and having a conversation where underneath is murderous intent, but it's said quite blithely and perhaps open for an interpretation.
Mark said when we were talking on the phone one day that anybody, given the right circumstances, is capable see that sometimes in myself, actually. Just, that if I'm angry with my husband, I could just drop that expensive cut on his foot. It's just a private line.
Yes, that's like, what kind of cut? Like a heavy cut?
Well, no,
It seems actually-
I can't be China, my darling.
That sounds very delicate in terms of being wild.
It's interesting that you're dealing with a group of wealthy upper-class people, 1931, which is not long after 1929, and here we are in 2009, not long after 2009, and you're dealing with a couple who had good times, and now they're maybe going to have good times again financially. A lot of people in 2009 and maybe in 1931 were thinking, well, maybe also financially things are going to bounce back again. And I'm wondering if there was any conscious or unconscious connection between the various themes.
Well, it's a couple of things. I mean, I've always been fascinated by things from the 30s for some reason, since I was a little boy. And I know that during the Depression, people would escape into movie theaters and into Broadway theaters to see people who lived very glamorous lives. And there was something, I don't know, comforting about that, or very, very attractive at least about that. And so that may be part of it. I mean, certainly the impulse to put on a play that is a comedy of any kind is a great idea these days. So that might be part of it.
I wonder if, Mike, if there's some, and this isn't about the production so much, because I don't know, that there might be some undercurrent that there's a brutality in the play that is allowed by a behavior that isn't financially constrained.
Yeah, manners without madness.
They don't have their accountability is really only to themselves. And I think that releases a kind of libido of some kind, or at least an impulse that they don't have to check. And I think there's something in there. I think it's inside of an entertainment, but I think it's there. Don't you, Diane?
Yeah, absolutely.
Because it is, the hedonism of it is being looked at. It isn't just being celebrated.
Yeah.
I've only read the play. I've never seen it, and it looks very. It looks like a piece of music like this. But when you hear it, it's an extraordinary. It goes into extremity of behavior with utter musicality, unlike any American play could ever do. Any American play I've ever read. That he takes them, veers them from the most beautiful, delicate, kind of sexually kind of moist intimacy to this. It takes them there in like 2 pages, and they'll just explode.
And it gets violent.
It gets violent, and then it stops. And there's this one fabulous line which I never quite read, I guess, or noticed when I read it, which is that after like the third one, I don't know how many of these, after a 2-minute silence that they impose upon each other.
Coward invented the timeout.
Her one line is big romantic stuff. Hey, darling?
Yeah, big romantic stuff, darling.
Big romantic stuff. Which is it's a big idea, plainly stated. After 2 minutes, that's a great encapsulation of what Coward was actually trying to get to. Big romantic stuff. Not little romantic stuff. Big romantic stuff. And it's stuff. And the British use the word stuff because they know there isn't actually a better word for it. That's how good they are with language.